My name is Penelope Chatterton. Welcome to Awaken the Dream. My friends, my twin sister is back for week 2 to talk about slavery in New England, which is going to be pretty fascinating. But before I let her get started on that, I want to bring up her book that we talked about last week called Icons of the Civil Rights Movement. And Pam, thank you, Pam, for coming, if you'll hold that book up. It has quite a history. We talked about it last week, and it's on your website.
I wanted to give another plug before we begin with slavery. This book is available at the Zion Union Heritage Museum.
Ah, that's right. 276
North Street. In the winter months, it's not actually open in January, but the winter months are usually Thursday through Saturday.
Yeah.
This book was a journey of almost 50 years, starting with my first job at Ebony Magazine, and it contains 27 icons. You can go to my website, which I know you had posted this morning, and see all 27, all the text, and now we'll get on with slavery.
Yeah. Anyway, I applaud you. This was an amazing, as we all know, that people who watch Awaken the Dream, everyone has a mission that is handed to them by virtue of their living life and listening and moving forward and taking chances and being gutsy, I think. I think caring for others and having a mission is a beautiful thing. Now, I don't know much about slavery in New England, so boy, you better help me out.
Well, it's very interesting because I don't know a lot about it either.
That's okay.
But I mean, if I had another life to live, I would probably do a series about slavery in New England, particularly because, I don't know about you, but growing up in New England, I never thought there were slaves in New England.
I always think of the South.
I always think of the South, plantations, cotton fields, and so forth. Never ever dawned on me we had slavery in New England.
Yeah.
Well, being part of Zion Union Heritage Museum, where John Reed, who is the president, taught history for 30 years, he has been very helpful, leading me to certain books and so forth. But when I took these icons to our college, our alumni college, Green Mountain College in Poultney, Vermont, I had only 17 icons at that time.
Yeah.
The people kept coming up and saying, "Did you know that a freed slave helped settle Poultney, Vermont?" I said, "You've got to be kidding. A slave?" And apparently, there is a tremendous amount of history about this man named Jeffrey Brace. Now, this is a G. Clay print of the icon that I did of him. I took it and gave it to the college at our 50th college reunion.
Yeah.
And it's about a yardstick wide. That's a G. Clay print, which of course is smaller. Is anybody going to focus on it?
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Good. This icon is how I imagined he might have looked. This man was captured in Africa and brought directly to New England. He never saw a plantation. He never was part of the South. He was taken to Woodbury, Connecticut. He was brutally treated. He was made to work outdoors in the winter with no shoes. He was fed like a dog, food thrown on the floor for him to eat. There is an incredible book that he narrated that I was made privy to called The Blind African Slave. Now, I say he narrated it because he was blind, and when this lawyer in town by the name of Benjamin Prentice
in Poultney
was talking to him, and he was talking about when he was 16 years old, how he was captured, how he was brought to Connecticut, how he was treated. Benjamin Prentice said, "This has to be recorded."
Good.
So he did write the narrative, dictated by Jeffrey Brace.
Yeah.
And this book is available at the bookstore
at
Zion.
Good.
Or you can actually go online and find it.
Yep.
A woman by the name of Mary Stiles in Woodbury, Connecticut, finally purchased him and treated him humanely. The man prior to him, who touted to be a devout Christian, was absolutely horrible to him. But Widow Mary Stiles purchased him. It was the first time he'd eaten food on a table and given a blanket at night to sleep.
Wonder he survived.
It is, because she taught him to read. She had sent him to a local school where he was horribly beaten.
Yeah.
So she homeschooled him, taught him to read. He literally memorized the Bible. Now, Benjamin Prentice said, now come on, how could you have memorized the whole Bible? He said, go ahead and test me. So he would say things like Mark 3:20 through 14, and he would quote it.
Wow.
It may have been the only book he ever learned to read by.
Yeah.
He became baptized. He traveled with other abolitionists all through Vermont and New England.
Wow.
He had a beautiful singing voice,
did he?
if I remember correctly, and just an amazing man. Now, this particular icon that I did of him has real chain, and actually I found on eBay an antique lock.
Yeah, I can see that right
Yes, there is a lock. And the two ends, which show the upended bird's eye view of a slave ship, shows how many slave bodies were packed into a slave ship at any one time. That's the upper deck and the lower deck. And some 350 people were packed onto one level alone. Sharks would follow these ships because a third of them would die before they even reached land, and they were tossed overboard. Horrific stories.
Yeah.
But I wanted to honor this man who actually ended up winning his emancipation by going to, I'm trying to remember which war. He fought in, it wasn't the Revolutionary War. He enlisted in the Continental Army in hopes of winning his freedom. After military service, he was honorably discharged and freed from slavery. That's just one incident that I had to research and find out about this man. The original, as I say, was donated to the college. Now, also at the Zion Union Heritage Museum is a book called The Man with the Branded Hand. Any of you that live in Harwich should know about this man. He was a Harwich resident. He was a ship builder and sailed from New England to Barbados and other places. And when he would stop in the Carolinas, some of the slaves would, seeking freedom, would ask to be able to be taken to Barbados or the Caribbean or whatever.
Yeah.
He was caught one day out on board with about 5 slaves that he had freed. He was taken to jail in Pensacola, Florida. He was thrown in jail, put in a pillory, whatever, fined, and his hand was branded with an SS. A hot burning iron was seared into his hand. I actually have a picture of it. No, I don't see it. Well, at any rate, the hand is on the cover of the book.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Frederick Douglass, who was an escaped free slave, who was an incredible orator, and by the way, spoke at the Dennis Union Church here in New England.
Oh, really?
Yes. He said that the SS should not stand for slave stealer, but for slave savior.
Oh.
So it was really very interesting.
And you just found out about this recently?
A few years ago.
A few years ago.
Yeah, we've known about.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, in your lifetime, and because you've got a little time, we have some time left. I can imagine what you're going to find, what's going to come to you from people seeing your material, looking at your icons of the civil rights.
Well, all I know is when I started out with a civil rights icon, and I'd gotten to 17 thinking that was it, and more study and more study, so I'm sure the same thing would happen were I to do a series on slavery. I would discover more and more and more. I know there's underground railroads all over the Cape. John has told me. Yeah, there are places in buildings which used to hide slaves. One of the interesting articles that David brought my attention to, in 2010, a woman by the name of Francie Latour, who works for the Boston Globe, wrote this article called New England's Hidden History. More than we like to think, the North was built on slavery. Now, when I first saw this picture, I thought, well, that was a sort of a wooded New England scene, but online, underneath that is a slave on the back of a slave with a chain hanging from his neck. Incredible story. I'm going to share with you just a few of her notes. This one is blood chilling, and it happened in Boston. In the year 1755, a black slave named Mark Codman plotted to kill his abusive master. A God-fearing man, Codman had resolved to use poison, reasoning that if he could kill without shedding blood, it would not be a sin. Arsenic in hand, he and 2 female slaves poisoned the tea and porridge of John Codman repeatedly. The plan worked, but like so many stories of slave rebellion, this one ended in brutal death for the slaves as well. After a trial by jury, Mark Codman was hanged, tarred, and then suspended in a metal giblet on the main road to town, where his body remained for more than 20 years. Paul Revere's account of his ride through Boston.
Oh, that's right. That's chilling.
Chilling. He mentions that he went galloping past Charlestown Neck and got nearly opposite where Mark was hung in chains. This is 20 years later, and his body was still, I'm sure, bones by then.
Oh, God.
Was hanging. So this is part of Francie Latour's article. And you can Google it. Go to Francie Latour, Boston Globe, New England's hidden history. Perhaps no New England colony or state profited more from the unpaid labor of blacks than Rhode Island.
Really?
Following the Revolution, scholars estimate slave traders in the tiny ocean state controlled between 2/3 and 90% of America's trade in enslaved Africans. So New England was heavy into slavery.
Is that surfacing more?
I think so, and I think as the Emancipation Proclamation 150th anniversary, more and more of this. But thanks to Francie Latour, more of this is
that's what
the power of the pen to reveal this thing. Now, this is an interesting story. Katrina Brown, who is involved with Brown University, a Boston filmmaker, was on a more private journey through New England slavery, tracing her bloodlines back to her Rhode Island forebears, the D. Wolfe family. As it turned out, the D. Wolfes were the biggest slave trading family in the nation's biggest slave trading state. She was horrified.
Oh my goodness.
Horrified.
Yeah.
She, as a filmmaker, interestingly enough, led her to a trove of records in the family's business at every point in slavery's triangle trade. Now, I thought I had outlined this and I don't see it, but she did a documentary, and you could probably find it if you Google Katrina, capital Katrina, Brown with an E on the end, Boston filmmaker, and she goes back, some of you I'm sure have seen it, I've seen it, and she goes back and traces where her ancestors picked up slaves, where they were enslaved, the buildings. I mean, it's a way she feels of paying penance for the horribleness of her ancestors.
Yeah. You know, that's, talk about post-traumatic stress, and when you think of what, some of your relatives went through, I mean, it must be so horrific for folks who had...
Well, somebody said to me once, if you're looking into your ancestry, be careful, you're going to find a horse trader somewhere.
Yeah.
But this was... This was an amazing story.
And
here it is. It's a Jonathan Walker thing I was looking for.
Look at
That's
that.
a picture of his actual hand with the SS seared into it. So.
Well, it's interesting too in 2012 how with a black president and the race card is coming up everywhere, and the disguise is coming down, the mask is coming down. We're still evolving on with this history that you've got that's so primitive and so torturous. It's on its way.
It is on its way, and it isn't through. If education isn't if people who write, people who paint, don't celebrate the truth about race and the truth about all of us being created equal. All of us having gifts, all of us being God's children, then I don't know what's the point of being here.
We'll probably be one color anyway one day.
Right. Well, I hope so.
I mean, that would be a good...
Actually, I love blue-black skin, and I love pure white skin, but I love every color. And, one other interesting bit of interesting information that came our way. Our daughter, as you know, Kristen, lives in Melrose. Well, she told me about this house with slave quarters in the next town of Medford. I said, what?
Oh, gee.
It's called the Royal House and Slave Quarters. The Royal is R-O-Y-A-L-L, and that was literally the name of the family, so it's not named after royalty per se. Isaac Royal was heavily into the slave trade. The Royal House and Slave Quarters were built in 1732 until 1737. The house is one of the finest 18th century buildings in New England. The slave quarters is the only such structure in the northern United States. And if you go online, look for the Royal, with 2 L's, house in Medford, and you will see pictures. I won't show them online, they're too small. But I have yet to get there. And I'm dying to go and see this place. But it has now been turned into a national historic site. Thank goodness that we didn't bury that little piece of history.
But you know, speak of unfolding, and when you started your work at Zion and all these folks came through the door that knew other folks that had literally lived through some of these traumas, it's just wonderful to see how those doors, the yellow brick road just keeps opening up for you, because I really can see more. I mean, you're going to just keep chugging along. You may work on commission, you may find things coming up that will add more, that you just have to add because it's history again. Would you, I mean, who knows?
Well, you may remember that when I'd get a report card when we were kids, it would say, does not use time well.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm making up for lost time.
Yeah, I know. And I was told not to do your homework. I love the story, though. I have to always tell people I used you as a stool.
Oh, you did.
To get out of the crib, because I was the first very redheaded,
I remember that.
over energetic twin. And poor Pam, she took quite the beating.
But at any rate, it is interesting how, you know, I'm not really quite through with this whole civil rights thing. And all of a sudden I'm thinking about slavery in New England, because it's just popping up as I take the icons and visit other people and other places.
Well, it got my imagination wondering. You know, think about the whole United States. Think of all the areas that must have.
Well, don't you remember when we went to visit Phyllis in Virginia?
Yes.
And we went to the stocks and the slave areas.
That's right.
The South has all of these areas. Exhibiting the history of slavery. And but as I've said earlier on in this discussion, I never thought we had slavery in New England. Never. Just was clueless.
Do you think it was out west?
Oh, I know it was. It was everywhere.
It was everywhere. So you're attacked.
Well, out west is another story, of course, because the Native American was brutalized, and they tried to. Genocide was big, even actually in Amherst, where you and I both lived.
Yeah, that's right.
Lord Jeffrey Amherst gave smallpox blankets to the Indians in hopes of having them get sick and die. So we have some pretty ugly history, but there's just...
Well, when you think of the cruelty in the world, you and I have been both sort of like looking at what's going on with war. You know, being an American is quite a blessing. As much as we've had our rough times.
It is a blessing, but you know, when we get so fearful of terrorism.
Oh, I know.
Stop. Wait a minute. We had our own terrorism in this country.
I know, we did.
2,000 slaves or blacks lynched in the South before 1900. Unbelievable cruelty to slaves. This was terrorism. It was to keep black people so quote unquote in their place. You keep them uneducated, unable to read, and you can keep them under control, because whites knew the power of education, as well as many of these women here who knew the power of education. That
it would be nice if America could be a role model and an inspiration, though, where we've come.
I think we are.
I think we are.
Especially with the election of Barack Obama. In spite of all the racist, horrible posters and libelous
We've seen it right in our own neighborhood. We've seen some very
we have.
Cruel.
Yes, we have.
Very racist. What would you call effigies and whatever. It's just hard to believe.
Yeah, petitions to petition to get, what is it called? Impeach Obama.
Yeah.
Outside the post office in Harwichport, with a picture of Obama with a Hitler mustache.
And who was the funny man that was sitting there that the police had to come and remove, who was dressed in hating Obama, and
I don't know.
he had flyers. And
It's ignorance. It's purely ignorance.
I know it.
And
I know. And
you and I know that Mom, who was Irish as they come, married a Chatterton English, of course, but she remembers in the newspaper, Irish need not apply. The Irish were discriminated on.
Yeah.
So blacks were the lowest. Then there was the Irish, and of course the without papers, Italians.
The Italians in New Canaan, we were raised in a very affluent town.
But very, very racist towards Italians.
I know.
So it's like there's this ladder, and the whites are at the top, and when the bottom starts to try and come up that ladder, it's very threatened. And of course, you've got the black president. Now, how much higher can you get than that?
Yeah. But I always mention Deepak Chopra looking at wounds. When you think of all of the uglies that have come out that have just been embarrassingly cruel, that the beauty in anything surfacing and being exposed is education.
Oh, yes.
It's an opportunity for us to really see things, to see the truth of this kind of an existence. So it's healing. I just believe we will get there. We're on our way. We're looking at stuff. It's tough.
But we're the melting pot.
Oh, we sure are.
And we are.
Yeah.
Continue to be.
Yeah. Tell our friends again about your book and where to find it. And, next summer you'll also be doing more tours.
Oh, the tours, there were 38 last summer. I'm sure there will be more than 38.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. When I was at Ebony, David reminded me, this woman came in this past summer, Bob Johnson's widow. He was the vice president of Ebony. And in this book, you will see a picture of Vice President Bob Johnson with me as a
with your
brunette,
as a
and with Dick Gregory. And I told her about the book, and she was so excited. David and I have to admit, I don't remember going to her apartment, but we were guests in their Chicago apartment, and it was a fun time in Chicago. We were entertained by Mahalia Jackson, who gave us a beautiful concert. Muhammad Ali, who became Cassius Clay, who became Madam Muhammad Ali, came in, but didn't want to see me because I was the White Devil. Really interesting. But he wrote that wonderful book and totally turned around about.
Freedom Singers is coming to me because you had an incident. I want to hear that.
I did. We took the exhibit to Obama's inauguration. And we drove all the way 8 hours to Washington with the exhibit, 17 of them at the time, set them up, came home, never thinking we would go back to the inauguration. Well, a couple of nights before the inauguration, Rutha Mae Harris called from the Freedom Singers and said, "Mrs. Purdy, we would love to come and sing at your art exhibit." I said, "Rutha Mae," I said, "I would be thrilled." So I hung up the phone and I said to David, "We are going back."
He's driving.
No, we didn't drive. We got an airplane. We managed to fly down the day before the inauguration. We met Rutha Mae. She and her quartet went out on the steps of the Methodist building right across from the Capitol building and started singing "Woke Up This Morning with My Mind Stayed on Freedom."
Oh, wow.
It was awesome. That group brought so many people in to see the exhibit. It was thrilling.
Again, a door opening.
Oh, yeah. And we flew back that night because we couldn't get a flight after the inauguration. But in a way, it was wonderful the next morning to sit with a cup of coffee and see all the inauguration up close. We probably would have been like a mosquito trying to see anything going on. But it was absolutely thrilling to be there. Everybody was there, all races. It was very cold, as you remember.
Yes, I do.
Men were taking their hats off, hands over their chest, when they played the national anthem at the rehearsal for the inauguration. Everybody was talking and relating and so proud to be Americans. It was just thrilling.
We have 3 minutes, Pam.
Good.
And I'd love you to just bring up what a nice example you are of a journey. because, you know, you never know where it's going to go. It's so funny. We could talk about the things we used to do as kids and the energy that we used to have and the interest that we had that we thought was it. And then that moved into yet another chapter, and how wonderful it is that once you sort of short-circuit something, and other doors open because they're supposed to. And then things just keep, as you say, you love the word head slaps. You keep getting them, and then sure enough, there you are riding on another horse. And,
right.
And so you're on this wonderful journey, and I know it's going to continue.
Well, every day is a day to be lived to the fullest.
Yeah.
And we don't know how many we have. I know I have an expiration date on my body somewhere.
I haven't seen it.
But every day is an adventure, as you say, and it's a fun time.
Well, it is. And you know what makes it fun is that you care about others, and that you have something special to share where you can uplift people as you teach them. I mean, it has to bring gratitude to all these folks.
To reveal the truth to people that don't know, and I admit I was one of them. I've educated myself as we go along, and people along the way have helped educate me, and the ball keeps rolling.
I think we have one black student in New Canaan, you know, that I remember.
Wilkie Gilmore.
Wilkie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, his whole family. Cecilia was in my class.
Oh, Cecilia.
Yes.
Yes. But I mean, it was just a very waspy.
Tokum type of.
Yeah. So we didn't know what the world was like.
Well, Jews weren't allowed in town.
They
were not. The realtors had a gentleman's agreement. Jews were not allowed in town.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and now here we are on Cape Cod, supposedly retiring and absolutely busier than we've ever been. I with my theater group, this program, you with your church, which means so much to you, and you're working for the homeless out here, and there are a million things that people can do, and volunteerism is so huge right now. There are just...
There's no reason for anybody to sit home and not have anything to do.
I can still remember after 9/11 how all of a sudden there was that rush to people serving. And you know, it hasn't gone away. It's only gotten better, where it's the norm now.
Yeah.
We serve.
Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate your coming on the show, and it's a great mission. And
thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. I think I'm going to check out.
Good.
Thank you, my friends, for joining us on Awake in the Dream. We'll talk to you again soon.